we'll start with this. Well, Clarissa Shields posted this image via her Twitter account with a caption that reads, "When I get my hands on Savannah Marshall, this is what's going to happen." And she posted everybody's favorite knockout in women's boxing, a classic brought to us by Ann Wolfe and Vonda Ward, when Ann hit Vonda with that big overhand right and flattened her in need of an exchange. You know, I often think about this fight, this rivalry between Clarissa and Savannah. I often think about how it will play out.
I often think about whether or not it'll happen.
Because in viewing things as they are, what Clarissa Shields is doing right now, I'm not convinced that this fight between Clarissa and Savannah happens this year. I'm not. Most of the news involving Clarissa Shields right now, what is circulating out there, has everything to do with her crossover into mixed martial arts. If you follow Clarissa Shields' Instagram account, you'll see what she's been working on. You'll see...
You know, MMA shit.
We are halfway through, more than halfway through, the month of January, and still no word on an official fight date for that Marie-Eve Dicker undisputed junior middleweight title fight. We don't know where we are with that thing.
Is that fight even still on?
I can't tell you if it is or isn't. I just know that no official announcement with an official fight date and venue has been made. Not yet. And we are most of the way through the month of January. It seems that Clarissa Shields' focus and a good portion of her time is going into this mixed martial arts endeavor. Her big crossover. That's where her focus lies now.
Part of me feels like she's not coming back.
Part of me feels that if she likes the way that PFL league is paying more than what she's been earning in the sport of boxing, in all likelihood, she won't return.
I think that's a genuine possibility.
And I'm not jumping to conclusions blindly. What sparked this mixed martial arts crossover has everything to do with what she stands to earn as a boxer. You know, Clarissa Shields has been very vocal about what she describes as sexism
in women's boxing, and
how these networks just don't want to pay these female fighters the right way. I think about that, and I see what Clarissa Shields is currently doing, and I wonder if that endeavor into mixed martial arts really takes off, does Clarissa Shields even bother to come back to the sport of boxing, to the squared circle?
Does she even bother to fight Savannah Marshall?
I want to say that I don't think that fight between Clarissa and Savannah happens this year, not given what's going on right now in January of 2021. A bold forecast, I know, but it does seem like Clarissa Shields' focus here and now has everything to do with crossing over into mixed martial arts.
Not boxing.
That being said, I don't think that fight between them is about to happen. Savannah Marshall very soon will be returning to the ring against an opponent that has yet to be announced. And for what it's worth, there are other fights out there for Savannah Marshall, not exclusive to the big Clarissa Shields fight. Savannah has the option of fighting a Christina Hammer, a Franchon Cruz, an Aline Cedar-Ruz, a Raquel Miller,
Maricela Cornejo,
Emma Kozin, Patricia Bergould, Chris Namas.
Any of these girls at or around 160 pounds.
Any of these girls that campaign from 154 to 160 to 168. These are the girls that Savannah Marshall can keep busy with, while Clarissa's off in the octagon doing her thing and dipping her toe in that pool. Savannah Marshall versus Alicia Napoleon. Savannah Marshall versus
Taylor Harris,
Jean Deja Green, Jessica Flores,
Leticia Robinson, Femke Hermans.
There still are girls out there that Savannah Marshall can keep busy with in Clarissa Shields' absence from the sport of boxing. But that allows me to allude to my next point. I often wonder how the fight between Savannah and Clarissa will play out, given when it's likelier to take place than not. I believe that by the time Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields enter the squared circle, if they ever do, Savannah Marshall may have amassed considerable professional experience by that time.
Whereas Clarissa may have done the same in the cage.
What about the boxing ring? What effect could this crossover have on Clarissa Shields' aptitude as a boxer? Multitasking.
Two very different disciplines.
Two very different disciplines where repetition,
practice,
conditioning becomes second nature. What is second nature in the cage is not second nature in the squared circle. They are very different. You're told not to lean over your lead foot in the sport of boxing, whereas in the cage you might have to in order to prevent takedowns.
Multitasking between the two.
What effect could that have on Clarissa Shields' aptitude as a boxer? Moreover, if she ends up dedicating more of her time to the octagon as opposed to the squared circle,
what effect is that going to have?
Gotta think about this now. Savannah Marshall is with a big-time promoter that has the kind of finance to get her fights, keep her busy, and keep her sharp. That's Savannah's situation. Whereas Clarissa's...
looks like she's taking a break from boxing.
Put your thinking cap on and take your time with this one. Realize, One of the only two girls at or around these weights that's got a major promoter behind them, that has a network deal or a deal with a platform. One, Savannah Marshall, by way of Matchroom, and the other is French on Cruz, by way of Golden Boy Promotions and Zone. Savannah Marshall has the kind of backing to get her fights, keep her busy, keep her sharp, allow her to amass all the professional experience that she needs, the preparedness it would take to lock horns with Claressa Shields.
She's got it.
For any of these girls that are campaigning anywhere at or around these weights, because as we all know, the girls fluctuate in weight more than the guys do. For any girl at or around 154, 160, 168, Savannah Marshall might turn out to be the money fight.
And she is a world champion.
Some of these girls I mentioned and some that I didn't, they might actually come to Savannah. Savannah won't have to come to them.
Have you thought about that?
As it stands, Matchroom is the only major promoter with a platform deal, network deal, whatever you want to call it, that's pouring money into the women's middleweight division. That could make Savannah Marshall, soon, the only money fight for any of these girls that are campaigning there. They might start coming to her, which affords her the opportunity to further develop as a professional boxer, though she does seem well on her way to doing that, given the performance she put on against Hannah Rankin. She stopped Hannah,
where Claressa decisioned her.
Both of those victories were decisive victories for Claressa, for Savannah. The difference being that Savannah actually stopped Hannah. She battered Hannah. The idea that, Claressa is going to do to Savannah what Ann Wolfe did to Vonda Ward just isn't likely. Claressa couldn't stop Ivana Habazin. She couldn't stop Hannah Gabriel, so she's going to stop Savannah Marshall, who's bigger than them?
And a bigger puncher?
Look, I don't know when this fight is going to happen. I really don't. But what I do know is, the longer it takes to make, the more it favors Savannah Marshall, as it affords her that much more time to fully develop as a professional boxer. And in that time, Claressa Shields, for all accounts, does look to be distracted. In other news, a verbal exchange between Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis has a lot of people thinking that these two kids are going to be fighting next. Ryan Garcia took to Twitter and said, "Fight to be announced real soon." To which Gervonta Davis replied, "You must know some shit that I don't." To which Ryan Garcia replied, "You're a grown man. Make a call and find out." To which Gervonta Davis replied, "Say less, bitch." And I maintain the same skepticism I always maintain. Same pessimism, the same cynicism. This doesn't strike me as the kind of fight that gets made in a jiffy.
Not in this climate.
The pandemic isn't over. Conditions are hardly ideal to have these two young fighters, who still have a lot of upside left to them, to have these two fighters fight under these circumstances when the crowds aren't all the way back yet and pay-per-views really aren't selling like hotcakes, assuming the fight would even be billed as a pay-per-view, as there are platform issues to be reconciled. Ryan Garcia, he fights on his own. Gervonta Davis, this guy's still using the conventional pay-per-view model.
Not selling much in the process of doing so.
I want to say that I think this is a big fight. I want to say that under the right circumstances, this is a fight that could very well do 1 million pay-per-view buys. I think that.
If it were billed as such.
I don't know that it is. I just suspect that if it were, this fight could do considerable business, even in the very antiquated, almost obsolete pay-per-view market, by way of the conventional pay-per-view model. I do think that this is one fight that could happen stateside that could do considerable numbers, better numbers than most of what else is out there. But what I don't think is that this fight is next. And what I do think is that Ryan Garcia's announcement for what could very well be his next fight might involve someone like a Jorge Linares.
Which I don't think is a bad fight.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think a Jorge Linares fight is likelier to happen in the near future than a Gervonta Davis grudge match, in spite of the very public back-and-forth exchanges between Ryan and Gervonta. Many times have we seen Gervonta go back and forth with somebody on Twitter, and it didn't result in a match. It didn't result in a fight. Ultimately here, I think the same applies. Maybe someday these two guys are going to lock horns. Maybe. But I don't think it's in the near future. These are not the ideal conditions to stage a fight between them.
It really isn't.
I'd love to be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. Time and time again, boxing has proven that these kinds of fights aren't the kind of fights that get made promptly, that get made in a jiffy, lickety-split. In welterweight news, Mikey Garcia took to Instagram and posted a caption that reads, "First day back, see you guys soon, hashtag Familia Garcia, hashtag number 5, hashtag RGBA. Number 5 being Mikey's attempt to become a 5-division champion. It seems that Mikey's got something in the works. We don't know what it is yet. It seems that Mikey is still vying to become a 5-division champion. And that being said, that really narrows his field of options, as there are only 3 welterweight champions out there, and he's already lost to one of them, Errol Spence Jr. There was some blurb about a Mikey Garcia versus Terrence Crawford fight, how that fight is a possibility under the right circumstances. Though if I'm being honest, I don't expect Mikey Garcia to lock horns with Terrence.
No way.
You have to understand that Mikey has a very sordid past with the people over there at Top Rank. I think he would rather not do business with them for what remains of his career. You also have to understand that Bob Arum is not in the business of overpaying fighters. Mikey Garcia is a fighter that was given something to the tune of $7 million just to fight Jesse Vargas. What do you think he'd want from Top Rank to fight Terrence Crawford? What kind of dollar amount would it take to get Mikey Garcia in the ring with that guy?
Yeah, the people over there at DAZN might have been willing to give you $7 million.
$7 million for Jesse Vargas and what was a non-title fight. The people over there at Matchroom and DAZN might have been willing to give you that amount of money. But I don't think for a second Top Rank's about to give you that, not even for Terrence Crawford.
They won't put up more than $1 million for either Sean Porter or Keith Thurman.
And I happen to think that Mikey Garcia comes with an even heftier price tag than those fighters. I think that Mikey Garcia comes with a heftier, much heftier price tag than that. That being said, if Mikey Garcia is going to be fighting for a world title in the near future in the welterweight division, I really don't imagine it's Terrence's world title. In spite of what blurbs and what's out there in the boxing cosmos, I really don't imagine that's going to be Mikey's next fight.
Especially when he hasn't fought in 11 months.
Close to a year now. Mikey Garcia was last in action in February of last year, the end of February last year, against Jesse Vargas. That fight that I just mentioned, that fight I was talking about. That's the last time Mikey threw a punch at anybody. I don't think he'd come off of 11 months of inactivity to share the squared circle with a guy like Terrence Crawford. Manny Pacquiao, well, that's a little bit more believable.
Is it going to be Manny Pacquiao?
I'm not completely sure, as it's been well over 12 months since Manny Pacquiao locked horns with anybody. He still is in possession of that WBA title, though, isn't he? And a fight with Manny would afford Mikey Garcia the opportunity to become a 5-division champion. We know that this is a fight that they were working on before the pandemic shut everything down. It is possible that maybe that's what Mikey Garcia is building towards?
Perhaps.
Because I honestly don't believe he's about to fight Terrence Crawford. You already lost to Errol Spence Jr. I don't see anybody asking for a rematch. The only other belt out there for you to fight for that would make you a bona fide 5-division champion is the belt Manny's got. Is that the guy Mikey is gearing up to fight?
And if it is, where does it happen?
The last time that Mikey Garcia was in action, it was on the DAZN platform under the Matchroom banner. Whereas the last time that Manny Pacquiao stepped in the ring with anybody, it was on the PBC side of things, on the PBC side of the street. If what we're looking at are the preliminary movements and motions towards making a Mikey Garcia versus Manny Pacquiao fight, where does that fight take place? Does it take place on DAZN? Does it take place on the PBC side of things by way of a Showtime or Fox Sports pay-per-view? These are questions that need answers.
I think we'll get them shortly.
But what I don't think is that Mikey Garcia is going to be fighting Errol Spence Jr. in a rematch that no one wants to see, or Terrence Crawford over there on the Top Rank ESPN side of things. Almost immediately, those are 2 names that I think we can rule out. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Frank Warren has said there have been preliminary talks for an Alexander Usyk versus Joyce fight, as the WBO want to order it for an interim belt. If this happens, it would allow Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury to be for the undisputed WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO heavyweight titles. I've talked about this developing situation in the heavyweight division in a previous video, and I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. It seems that the Joyce fight could be arriving ahead of schedule. I anticipated that the Joyce fight could take place perhaps after the first Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury fight.
At or around the same time.
But it does appear to be arriving ahead of schedule. And one thing rings true, one sentiment I previously expressed, that this Joyce fight appears to be an eventuality, something that Alexander Usyk is going to have to do, something he's going to have to deal with, someone, rather. The WBO appears to be hitting the gas on that fight to bring reconciliation to the Tyson Fury-Anthony Joshua situation?
Will it?
That is yet to be determined, as that reconciliation is contingent upon Alexander Usyk deciding to play ball, deciding to go along with the plan. One thing's for sure.
What?
People over there at Matchroom, people over there at Top Rank, they're not going to let him get in the way of Joshua versus Fury. That's essentially saying that that fight is going to go on, with or without the WBO title being on the line. And if that's the case, and you can't stop that fight from happening, well, you might as well play ball.
Being the mandatory challenger was your only leverage in the situation.
That was Alexander Usyk's only chance of standing in the way of that fight, interrupting that schedule. But you see what the reaction is. If they've got to sacrifice the WBO title and make the fight happen, they're prepared to do so.
You might as well play ball.
One way or another, that Joshua versus Fury fight is going to happen, and one way or another, it does appear that Alexander Usyk is going to have to fight Joyce. The fight happens sooner than later. The talk is that that fight would be for a WBO interim title, interim belt that secures the winner of the match first dibs at the WBO title, vacant or otherwise. Another interesting development in the heavyweight division that could affect this situation is that the Joseph Parker versus Junior Fa New Zealand domestic clash, it has been rescheduled and it's set to go down late next month. Joyce climbed up the WBO's ranked standings for having defeated his countryman Daniel Dubois, but ranked right behind Joe, the last set of WBO ranked standings, is Joseph Parker. And it's conceivable that if he beats Fa,
If he beats Junior Fa, he might move past Joe.
which gives the Joyce Queensberry Promotions Frank Warren side of things that much more incentive to get this fight done and get it done quickly. Get it on paper that the winner of this fight will be the WBO's interim champion before
That Parker versus Fa fight takes place.
that fight could change the current ranked standings and alter the situation.
We'll see what happens.